Namaste and welcome to the Explainer. You know, every single day we get hit with this storm of headlines, right? A political speech over here, a terror threat over there, a scientific breakthrough somewhere else, and they all feel totally disconnected. Well, our job is to find the hidden connections. We're the thread that ties it all together to show you the bigger picture. So, let's get into it.
We're going to start right here with 6 words. Blood and water will not flow together. This is a quote from the Prime Minister, and honestly, it's our most important starting point for the day. A line like that, it doesn't just slip out. It's a calculated move, right? Spoken on a huge national stage, aimed at a specific target, and designed to grab every single headline. It sets the tone for a day of intense debate, ambition, and, a lot of contradiction. So, the big question we've got to ask is, why this threat? Why right now? And what in the world does it have to do with a water treaty that's been around for over 60 years? Let's unpack it.
Okay, so let's dive into our first section, the nation's narrative. I want you to think of this as the main stage of the country. This is where all the big, loud conversations are happening, the ones about power, politics, and who we are as a nation. It's the story that India's leaders are trying to tell, and at the same time, the story the opposition is desperately trying to rewrite. And today, that story is all about conflict, history, and a really bold, sprawling vision for the future.
So, that fiery quote about blood and water, it was a direct response to the horrible, tragic terror attack in Polygon. The Prime Minister explicitly tied that attack to this, the Indus Waters Treaty. I mean, this treaty goes all the way back to 1960. It's so much more than just a piece of paper. It's been like a diplomatic shock absorber that has somehow survived 3 wars. It's kept the water flowing for millions of people on both sides of the border, even when things were at their absolute worst. So to threaten to tear it up now, to call it unjust, isn't just a small policy shift. No. This is a fundamental change in the rules of the game. It takes a life-giving resource, something you need for survival, and reframes it as a potential tool of coercion, a weapon of foreign policy.
The Prime Minister's Independence Day speech turned into another huge flashpoint. And this debate wasn't just about what's next, it was about what happened in the past. When the PM praised the RSS, the opposition came back with a sharp, immediate rebuttal. Now this is so much more than just the usual political jabs. This is a battle for the soul of the nation's history books. When you're arguing about the role of an organization like the RSS in the freedom struggle, you're really arguing over the very definition of Indian patriotism. It's a fundamental clash over who gets to write India's national story, who are the heroes, and whose version of history is going to be taught to the next generation. That fight is happening right now, out in the open.
But beyond all that controversy, the 103-minute speech was also this giant vision for the future. You could almost call it a policy buffet, a little something for everyone. We heard about GST reforms, a massive one-lot core scheme for young people, and a big push for technological and military self-reliance. I mean, think about that Made in India chip promise for a minute. That's not just about making a product. That's a declaration of technological independence in a world where supply chains are everything. So this isn't just a list of promises. It's really a blueprint for a more self-reliant, tech-forward India. But, like with any grand blueprint, the real test is in the actual building. Execution is what's going to matter, not just the announcements.
Oh, this quote really gets to the heart of what we're talking about next. Because while that grand narrative is being broadcast from Delhi, the reality on the ground can be, very, very different. Let's head over to Nagaland. On Independence Day, the feeling wasn't just celebratory, it was tense. There were high security alerts. Major insurgent groups called for a total boycott of the celebrations. And if that wasn't enough, a major tribal committee used the day to protest the state's job reservation policy. It's just a powerful reminder that the idea of India isn't some single, uniform story. It's a complex tapestry woven with local issues, unresolved historical grievances, and distinct identities that continue to shape the nation from the ground up.
And then, over in Maharashtra, a completely different kind of tension was bubbling up. In a bunch of cities, civic bodies ordered all meat shops to be closed on August 15th. And as you can imagine, this immediately kicked off a political firestorm. Now look, this isn't a new fight, but it's a very telling one. It's that classic friction point in any diverse democracy. Where does public sentiment end and private freedom begin? It pits religious sensitivities against individual liberties and people's livelihoods. And on a day that's supposed to be all about celebrating freedom, this whole controversy forces us to ask what that word really means in practice.
It's a fair question, right? After wading through all the high-stakes diplomacy, the big historical debates, and the cultural clashes, you just have to wonder, beyond all the rhetoric and the controversy, who is actually rolling up their sleeves and getting stuff done?
And that brings us perfectly to Act 2, Problem Solvers and Pioneers. So if the first act was all about the noise and debate from the top, this act is about the signal coming up from the ground. We're going to shift our focus from the talkers to the doers, the people and institutions creating real change, sometimes in a courtroom, sometimes in a village council, and sometimes with just a bucket and a scrub brush. 1. That's our next number, just a single digit. But in the world of the Malayalam film industry, this one represents a revolution. Because for the very first time, the Association of Malayalam Movie Artists, also known as AMA, has elected its first woman president, the actor Shweta Menon. Now, this isn't just about changing the name on an office door. This is about shifting the entire balance of power in a massive, hugely influential cultural institution. After years and years of struggle, this is a major crack in a very old, very tough glass ceiling.
Meanwhile, in the highest court in the land, a totally different kind of barrier is being torn down. The Supreme Court has taken a long, hard look at India's adoption law and used a really strong word to describe it: frustrating. And you have to remember, behind that bureaucratic wall are actual children who need a family, and prospective parents who are stuck in this agonizingly slow process. So when the Supreme Court steps in and calls for freedom from bureaucracy, it's a powerful push to put the needs of the child first, ahead of the system's inertia. The goal is this delicate but absolutely crucial balance: make the process faster without making it any less safe. It's a real push for compassion through better governance.
26,000. What do you think that is? It's not a budget number. It's the number of times a person has been bitten by a dog in Delhi, this year alone. That is a staggering figure, and it points to a huge, long-running civic failure. So the response from the Municipal Corporation of Delhi is a pretty major policy shift. They're planning to build dedicated dog shelters in all 12 of its zones. This moves the approach from just reacting to a problem on the street to a more planned, citywide infrastructure solution. It's a concrete step towards managing a really complex human-animal conflict in a massive city.
From city infrastructure, we're going all the way down to village governance. The government just showed off a new tool called Sabha Sar. Okay, think of it as stenographer meets ChatGPT, but for local democracy. Its job is to listen in on Gram Sabha meetings and automatically generate the minutes and reports. I mean, the potential is incredible. Imagine saving hundreds of hours of manual work and creating a perfect digital record of every decision. But of course, with any new tech, the tool itself is the easy part. The real challenge is making it work for everyone, no matter their language or how tech-savvy they are. Success is going to come down to training, support, and trust.
I just love this quote. It perfectly captures the spirit of this next story. So, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India held a council meeting in Pahalgam. Now you might be thinking, why is that a headline? Well, it's a headline because this was the first high-level meeting to happen there since that devastating terror attack in April that killed 26 people. This act wasn't loud or political. It was quiet, but it was so determined. By just conducting business as usual, by bringing their balance sheets and their ledgers to a place scarred by violence, they sent this incredibly powerful message: terror will not win and normalcy will prevail. This is truly defiance by balance sheet.
And for our final story of problem solvers, we're landing in Bengaluru. Now, remember that fiery debate we talked about earlier about patriotism and who gets to define it? Well, while all that was happening in speeches and on TV, a group of volunteers from an NGO showed us what patriotism actually looks like. They celebrated Independence Day by getting their hands dirty, cleaning and restoring the Freedom Wall, which is a public art installation. This is the difference between rhetoric and reality right here. Instead of just talking about national pride, these citizens took ownership of their public space and they showed it with action. This is quiet, constructive patriotism.
All right, so we've seen the debates on the national stage, and we've seen the real progress happening on the ground. For Act 3, we are lifting our gaze way up and way down.
We're heading to the new frontiers, from the vacuum of space to the crushing pressure of the deep sea, to see where India's boldest ambitions are taking us next.
I mean, this line sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, doesn't it? A 12-meter eye-opening in the silence of space. But it's very, very real, and it just happened. This is the latest milestone from NISAR, that joint NASA-ISRO satellite that was launched from India back in July. This absolutely massive 12-meter radar antenna has now been successfully deployed.
And this is why that matters so much. As this quote puts it so beautifully, this isn't just a piece of hardware floating up there. This is humanity, quote, building the eyes that will watch over our planet's health. This single mission is going to give us an unprecedented, super high-resolution look at climate change, at deforestation, melting glaciers, and natural disasters. It's a pretty profound act of international collaboration and, really, global guardianship. So from the vastness of space, we now plunge deep into the ocean. 5,002 meters. That is over 5 kilometers straight down. A depth where the pressure is just immense and the darkness is absolute. An Indian aquanaut just reached that incredible depth in the Atlantic, diving in a French submersible. Now, this wasn't just some joyride. It was a critical test for India's really ambitious Samudrayan deep ocean mission. The thinking is, as resources on land get more scarce, the deep ocean is the next frontier for resource security. This whole mission is about developing the technology to explore it and secure India's future needs.
And for our final act, we have to zoom all the way out. Because, let's be honest, none of these stories we've talked about, the politics, the progress, the ambitions, they don't happen in a bubble. They happen in a messy, interconnected, and often really tense world. So let's place today's brief in that larger global context to really understand the forces that are shaping everyone's reality.
All eyes were on Alaska, where US President Trump and Russian President Putin met for a high-stakes summit focused on the war in Ukraine. There was some cautious hope, for some kind of breakthrough, but as the outcome here makes painfully clear, that's not what we got. The summit ended with no agreement on a ceasefire. It's one of those moments of both relief that things didn't get worse and deep worry that nothing got any better. For a country like India, which has to navigate these really complex relationships with both nations, this stalemate just means that delicate global balancing act continues with no relief in sight.
And speaking of tensions that just don't go away, let's hop over to the Korean Peninsula. You know that feeling when you think a situation is finally starting to improve? There was a little bit of that hope in the air recently. Well, that hope was short-lived. North Korea issued a pretty stark warning of retaliation against the upcoming joint military drills between the US and South Korea. It's a classic move from their old playbook, really, and just a sharp reminder to the world of how fragile peace really is in that region.
And finally, a grim anniversary. As this timeline shows, it has now been 4 years since the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan. Today, the country is still basically a pariah state, completely isolated from the international community. And the most devastating consequence has been the harsh and systematic repression of women, which has just erased decades of hard-won progress. This anniversary isn't just a date on the calendar, it's a chilling, ongoing tragedy and a stark reminder of how quickly a society's progress can be thrown into reverse.
And that brings us full circle, right back to this final question. When you look at this global picture, you see the stalled summits, the renewed threats, the reversed progress. It can feel pretty overwhelming. But then you think back to the stories from home. You think of that defiance by balance sheet in Polygon. You think of the AI tool trying to empower a village council. You think of the citizen scrubbing a wall in Bangalore out of pure civic pride. In a world where the big narratives so often fail us, how vital, how absolutely essential are these smaller, tangible acts of progress and hope? That's the thought we want to leave you with today. Follow us on Spotify and YouTube to listen to this explainer every morning at 8 a.m. Thank you so much for joining us. Our whole mission here is to put through the noise and connect the dots for you, and we're able to do that independently because of the support of our viewers. If you found this valuable, the absolute best way to support what we do is to subscribe at OneRead.news and share this with someone who you think might appreciate a clearer take on the news. Your support helps us stay ad-free and totally focused on this mission. We'll be back with more headlines for you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Until then, keep smiling and making this world a better place for everyone. Namaskar.